How are you, Matt? So, gentlemen, please take a seat. The purpose of this panel today is going to be something that we hope you'll find interesting. We have four incredibly talented and successful individuals on the stage, and we'd like them to tell us a story about how they got to where they are, and to ask you to start picking their brains about what role did Georgia Tech play in their careers. So I think we'll start off with just getting a feedback on kind of a quick snapshot of your background and who you are and how you got to and how Georgia Tech helped you get where you are. So Matt, you're the lucky one to kick off the whole thing.
Okay, so I go first. I'm from Georgia, so I was born there, raised there. I actually, there was a guy kids down the street from me, the father of that family, used to hand down clothes to my family. And I asked my parents where he went to school and they told me Georgia Tech, which I had never heard of it. I was a kid. And so that was kind of something that always stuck in the back of my mind. And then when I went to junior college, the teacher for my calculus class was like, you guys complain about calculus, but you don't have anything on the guys at my school. And I was like, where did this guy go to school? And then he's like, I went to Georgia Tech. So, and that kind of reminded me of that earlier phase. And so that's kind of how I ended up with ambitions to go there. And then I just happened to be interested in computer science, which turned out well. And then when I graduated, Expedia recruited me from campus at a Georgia Tech career fair. And I spent about 13 years working for Expedia, riding that company from $5 to $8 a share to $160 a share, and going from 1,000 employees to 20,000 in every country in the world, and taking over our competitors in the process. So we went from the third or fourth biggest in the U.S. to then the biggest in the world. I think now they're number 2, second to Priceline. And then I left for a year, took a sabbatical, went to a tech company in Santa Monica, California, and then moved back to London, joined Expedia again, and then moved to Burberry about a year ago. And so I've been with Burberry since then. So that's kind of my journey. But I started off as an engineer, a computer scientist doing development and programming, and then now I run the product team at Burberry, so I'm more on the strategy side, which to one of the speaker's points earlier, it was really an artifact of that. I was one of the few developers that could speak in a level that you could instill a certain level of confidence in the engineering team, and it made a big difference for my career and put me in the ability to move to the division side versus just the implementation side, which is where I started in many ways. So that's me.
Thanks. So you went from Georgia Tech to Fashion Tech, so that's a pretty good move. Kurt, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Yes, my name's Kurt Hopkins, and a bit of a different career. I joined Georgia Tech as a graduate student in the School of Management. So I got a Master's of Management in '95, and I'm very grateful for Georgia Tech for taking me. I think Georgia Tech probably took a big chance, and very, very grateful. I was just thinking back. When I was there, I had the opportunity to do an international exchange with the University of Twente in the Netherlands through the cyber program. John McIntyre, just looking up his name. And so I was very grateful to do that because that got me started on an international career. And when I graduated from tech, the job market wasn't great, so I thought I'd take a bit of a punt. And I had some telecoms background. I'd done some consulting prior to Georgia Tech. And I ended up, long story, but working with an AT&T investment that they had made in a company in the former Soviet Union back in the mid-'90s. And we were in a country called Kazakhstan and spent 5 years there. It was a startup. I was kind of very early on. It was a internet service provider. And we did this thing called dial-up internet, very exciting, right at the time when the browser was coming around. And and Kazakhstan is an amazing country. It's the size of Western Europe in landmass, so it's a very large geographic area, but it only has around 15, 16 million people. So we put in the first nationwide digital network all over satellite. We had the biggest internet service provider in Central Asia, across the region. We did all the corporate networks for all the big oil and gas companies, as well as all their suppliers, all the big accountancy, law firms, engineering firms. And we obviously had to deal with all the various security agencies from the U.S. and the former Soviet Union as well. So it was a lot of fun because I wasn't directly involved, but I was just a business guy. And I was thrown out there because I had 2 accounting classes at Georgia Tech, and they made me the CFO of this venture. So it was wild. But anyway, so it ended up growing, very successful business, took about $10 million in revenue, and we sold that business. And then I ended up in London, and I embarked on a larger corporate career working for big corporates. And I was just thinking, because you're talking about your Expedia experience. I was at Nortel. We started at 30,000, went down to 10,000 people, and then now it's a 0, I think. I experienced the dot-com bust, or in the early 2000s, working in telecoms and telecoms equipment, the big impact, and I was running at one point in time a very, very large business unit for Nortel, a $2 billion business unit. Obviously that's changed a lot because of the impact of what happened in the post-crash. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens here in the coming years in the tech scene as well, because we've always had a big boom that has happened. And so I did about 9 years of big corporate jobs, and then since then I've done smaller businesses, continue to get smaller. I did a management buyout of a medium-sized tech business up in Scotland that we sold on. This was back in 2010, 2012. And then I've done a couple CEO jobs, and now I'm on 3 boards of all early stage businesses, some into revenue, some that are quite early stage as well, and I'm CEO of one of those. And then the business I'm the chief exec of is a blockchain business in the retail tech space.
Thank you very much. Very impressive, especially the Kazakhstan story.
Yeah,
Matt, you want to?
Never been to Kazakhstan.
I can't go back.
My name is Matt Spetzler. I grew up in the mountains of Virginia, and I ultimately wanted to be an automotive engineer. So I looked at the engineering schools on the East Coast. I spent a summer trying to code out in the West Coast. I actually didn't get into Stanford, so I went to the Stanford of the East Coast, Georgia Tech, and I think got a better education. And ultimately, my story, I started there as a mechanical engineer. I, at the time, also started, because I wanted to build cars, an organization called GT Off-Road, that we built the first kind of car from scratch, and then we raced it around the world. That gave me a lot of hands-on engineering experience. I ultimately chose Georgia Tech because I thought it had the best-looking girls of the engineering schools I looked at on the East Coast. It must have been a sunny day, but I still had a good time there. I spent a lot of time in the machine shop. From that, I started my first company building actually a Christmas present for my parents, which was a unique wine rack that held bottles off the side by their necks. And we thought people wanted to buy it when they saw it, so we started to build our company and got into some art galleries and restaurants and such in Atlanta. And that in the GT Off-Road experience kind of sparked my interest in business and kind of to some degree leadership. And so I decided to try to learn business and was lucky enough to get a job in strategy consulting for a while at Bain. I think it was the first time they had hired somebody out of Georgia Tech versus the normal schools with the pretty boys that write better and read better than I do. But luckily had a couple of good years at Bain and ultimately wanted to get back in technology. And at the time I learned about investing, learned about private equity, to which I had no idea of when I started, and was lucky enough to get a job at a firm called Francisco Partners on the West Coast that was both investing and technology. Went through like 29 interviews, met everyone in the firm and fooled them. And thus, I joined there in San Francisco for a couple of years doing tech investing. So what we do at Francisco Partners is mature companies, kind of taking growth stage or established businesses, how do you make them better? So how do you improve operations? How do you grow? How do you expand? How do you get better best practices? And I did that for a few years. I helped open our London office in 2005. And then ultimately, I couldn't decide if I liked the entrepreneurial bug or the investing bug better. Went back to my MBA at the Georgia Tech of the West, Stanford for a couple of years, tried to start 3 businesses while there, realized I wasn't very good at it, and ultimately wanted to be entrepreneurial investing. And at that point, I came back to London and joined our office here. We were kind of restarting, and I've been here, that was supposed to be for a year. It's now been 10 years, and living here in London. I now have a family here, and I co-head our European operations. So we have about 14 billion of capital under investment. I've been on probably 12, 15, different technology boards. I also do some angel investing on the side, and I'm passionate about helping some of the people in Georgia Tech and community help grow kind of tech businesses.
Thank you very much. So from off-road to investing. So
One of the few investors that can still weld, I think.
thank you very much. Jean-Christophe?
Yes, so hello, Jean-Christophe. So I graduated from Georgia Tech in 2012. I'm from France, born and raised in Normandy. Initially, I come from more the mechanical engineering side. I don't have that impressive track record of others panelists, still building it. I had this great opportunity during my scholarship in France to do a master at Georgia Tech, which was for me quite a great opportunity because I always been quite hands-on on many technical aspects of engineering, from electrical to computing and mechanical. But whereas in France we have a quite deterministic scholarship system where you fit in one box and you have to stick with what you're doing. What I really appreciated with Georgia Tech was this opportunity to broaden the skills I had aside and I developed on other activity, but not during my scholarship. So I could go through sensor networks, DSP, signal processing, and basically all the technology and all the skills that today I'm using with the company I built 4 years from now. And now we are developing medical device, and basically we are involved with mechanical development to develop miniaturized technology from mechanical, electrical, and computing. So Georgia Tech was for me a great opportunity to get the confidence and the level of expertise I could use in developing my business. Also, I had the chance before so I went to Georgia Tech Lorraine before I experienced Georgia Tech in Atlanta. I had also the great opportunity to work with former director of Georgia Tech Lorraine, François Malasné. I guess some people here still have some remind him from that time. He became actually a great friend and a great support in my development, and kind of a mentor for the company as well. So Georgia Tech is basically all of that, from the knowledge to the support I get from the community on my journey.
Thank you very much. I just also noticed I haven't said anything about my background, which is similar to one of yours. I went to Georgia Tech for a civil engineering degree. I then went back to Europe and started working in infrastructure projects in Africa. So I built a railway in Nigeria, a road in Sierra Leone, connecting Sierra Leone to Mali, going through Guinea. I then also did the high-speed line taking from Warsaw to Gdansk using tilting trains in the late 90s. So I went to Warsaw when there was no traffic. So if you've been to Warsaw recently, you realize it's a very big deal. I then went for an MBA and joined GE Capital. I started looking at financial services. I left GE Capital to get into an accelerator incubator, which was very fashionable in the year 2000. And we raised close to 100 million. We went from 30 people to 120 people to 15 in 18 months. When the dot-com crash came, we lost all the money and so on. I then kind of got myself together, started engaging with the tech world. So I went into the fintech space, and I joined PayPal as employee 11 in the UK. So building their whole merchant services activities, taking PayPal into the likes of Boots and Betfair and so on. Got into a couple of fights with Meg because she didn't want to get back into gambling. Meg Whitman was the CEO at the time, so it was easy to talk to them now. Now it's impossible. I then became the managing director of a payments company and then the CEO of digital banking for a big UK bank. And then I got out of this and decided to set up my own firm. And I advise companies on how to work with smaller firms. So I'm like a headhunter for businesses. So I help big banks find the smaller business they need to work with to be successful. And I think one of the things I think about Georgia Tech always reminds me is always looking for what really makes something work and looking for that core element at the center of a complex system that actually is what makes this thing fail or succeed, which is what an engineer does. So whenever you see a structure as an engineer, you see a beautiful building. What I actually see is lines and forces going through things. So that is what drove me to this. So thank you very much for the snapshots, guys. What I want to hear from you guys is more specifically, which skills do you think that Georgia Tech delivered to you? What did Georgia Tech do to you that got you on your career and got you to be as successful as you are today? So, second Matt Spetler, you want to kick this off? Sure. And here's the microphone here too.
Skills I learned. I think I'd say opportunity and whatever it is. I don't know. Grit.
You said welding at some point. So
yes, welding is not one I use today. I keep hoping, but. Yeah, I think it's almost, when I remember the invocation or you sat down in the introduction to Georgia Tech in the basketball court at the time. They told you look to your left, look to your right, one of you won't be there or two of you, I don't remember which. But either way, it was a big number. And I think Georgia Tech both on one hand gave the opportunity to start an organization. I got 3 no's, but at times got encouragement to still try because people had failed before. And, I took that as making me stronger rather than, backing down. And I think it's So
the beating is what strengthened you from
It's to some degree the truth. I think.
So guys, take note of that.
And I say it in a good manner when people ask me about Georgia Tech. It's a place where it teaches you and prepares you for the real world. Right? The real world isn't everything handed on you on a platter or you get everything ready. It actually challenges you to have to challenge yourself back to be successful. And I think that's a skill set I learned by getting the opportunity to do things, by being challenging curriculum, and by having kind of the resources around you to try to make you successful in that when you wanted to make it the best of it.
Matt, you look like you're reminiscing about something. So what was it for you that Georgia Tech gave?
Well, I was thinking that, so within my field, the technical side of what I learned at Tech, it gets antiquated quite quickly, right? It's in software. But what it did teach me was a level of abstract thinking, of accepting the fact that if you know nothing, it's not a big deal. That it's more about how you process that information and how comfortable you are in not knowing. And so for me, I also transferred into tech in my junior year. So it was like the primary weeding out had been done, and I kind of arrived after the carnage. But then I had to take a lot of the harder classes my last semester at Tech. I think I had 2 math classes and 3 computer science classes with no electives. I was amazed that I graduated. I had nightmares for years that Georgia Tech would call and say, we actually figured out that you should not have graduated, and you've got to come back. So to that effect, it was the abstract thinking, the ability to kind of have confidence in knowing things, and I was humbled by the entrepreneurial side of it. I've never been an entrepreneur in an external sense, but I've operated within the research team at Expedia when we replatformed, which is kind of a hand-picked 10% of the engineering population. And I hung out with people who were much more qualified and experienced than I was. And so we were a startup inside that company, and then now I run a startup inside of a fashion company, which is that, we're 15% of the business, and we're a tiny piece of the workforce. But a lot of the skills that you have in an entrepreneurship has to work in a big organization like that. So I pulled those skills out of it. So I think the tangible skills, the things that you think in that moment that I thought I was going to use, like programming, I never actually programmed when I got out of tech as a computer science major.
It's almost like a mindset you learned rather than
Totally.
specific.
And when I transferred in, so I went to 4 schools to get to acquire the credits to transfer into tech before I could get in. My SAT score was really low, and I didn't want to retake it, so I ended up going to Kennesaw, Southern Polytech, Georgia Tech, and then I went back to Southern Polytech again before I could transfer into Georgia Tech. So when I got there, I kind of had a hodgepodge of different credit levels, and it took me 5 years. But when I arrived, because I didn't have that network, it was really about just a curriculum.
Excellent. Jean-Christophe, you came from France to go all the way to Georgia Tech. Can you tell us, what did you learn? What was unique about Georgia Tech that got you where you are?
For me, it's how the scholarship is really linked to the application. And in France, we are really good in terms of theories, in terms of models. And actually, it was a great skill to be formed in France. So when you arrive in the American system, you already have the tools, and you don't necessarily work on the tools and to harness all the engineering tools, but you focus more on applying those tools to real application, and I really had a kick out of it. And the other part is the American model is really linked to the research, and I remember discussing with several professors, as I think it was Professor Alcides, working for disabled people, working on magnetic systems so they could drive their wheelchair with a tongue. And those type of project and real application was really for a French student who you hardly see that in the university. So it was really refreshing, and you could see this level of application in the industry and the next level to what you will be applying.
So taking things from
your
concept
skills.
to reality was something that you learned
yes,
how to do that well.
To the pragmatism of engineering, where in France it's not that pragmatic. You learn models, you learn to be the beast in terms of mathematics, and then you learn, okay, this has concrete application, and you see it, you discover it.
Well,
So-
French engineers are famous, so that's
Well,
there's jokes about
but-
those. So.
yeah.
Kurt, what do you think? What did you get out of it?
Real quick, we mentioned, you were talking about the capstone earlier, and the capstone for me, I got a job offer from the capstone on the way out, so it was Home Depot. I didn't take it in the end, I went with Expedia, but for me that was like, I could have had a job as a result of it, so that skill obviously was transferable.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's quite interesting for me because I didn't do undergrad at Georgia Tech, just did grad school, and it was a business school, generic or general business education. And I was just thinking about today, I use it all the time still, the theories, or, because in business school you study a bit of everything, right? A bit of corporate finance, a bit of HR, a bit of tech, and accounting, finance. So that general knowledge is useful all the time, and one feels confident that you can go discover something if you need to. And I would say the other thing Georgia Tech did for me was around the management of technology, which was a thing back in the 90s. I don't know if it's a thing now. It sounds like Agile is, in which I'm a massive fan of Agile. So that for me was a big learning about how do you apply technology in a business context, how do you manage that as part of your day job. And so that's had a massive impact for me, which I'm very grateful for.
Fantastic. Now, I would like to look at the reverse of the medal. What do you think that Georgia Tech could have done better that it didn't do, that could have helped you more in your career? And Matt, start with you. Matt.
What it didn't do. Yeah, I don't have something right off the top of my mind that it did poorly for me.
What do you wish that it had done more, or something that it could have done? It's some opportunity missed. Let's put it that way.
I mean, I think transferring in was difficult. You know, that was probably the most difficult part of my education when you come in and you transfer in, you don't have a network. At the time, I don't remember, it was like 70% Greek or something. So I ended up in UCL. I don't even know if that exists. It's like it was a dormitory with athletes and presidential scholars, as far as I could tell. And I was neither. So I think that the transition with coming in kind of mid-phase, mid-education, that could have been smoother for me to kind of have some sort of induction process for that. But I mean, it worked itself out. So I can't, that's a low on my concerns, but that's one of the things I think could have been better.
Matt, do you have any views? You were glad I didn't ask you the question. So.
Yeah. It's a tough one because we've only lived our own experience. Hopefully we're up here because it's worked out. I think for me, a lot of the things that I would have pointed out, I think I've already changed to some degree. Like there's a capstone project, and I felt like there were things at Georgia Tech I had to fight for to create. Like I was trying to take the practical of starting GT off-road and weave it into my curriculum to make it my senior project, or things that I think now is actually more tangible. Mm-hmm. I think entrepreneurship was not that big of a thing, and when I graduated in 2002, nobody, it wasn't that great of economic time. Entrepreneurship wasn't as weaved into the curriculum, I think, as it is today from my perception. So it feels like a lot of those things that I probably would have benefited more as being an engineer, kind of learning the business and the practical reality, that I found other outlets to do that I think are more part of the mainstream today.
Thank you very much. So, Kurt, do you have anything you want to?
Well, I mean, for me, and it's been answered with the presentations we had today, was around entrepreneurship. I mean, I think I did a project with some guys building some biomass. It took waste and created, biomass material that you could then burn, and it was very limited, the entrepreneurial aspect to the business school at that time. And so what you're doing now with the Agile piece, I applaud. It's really fantastic to see. And the number of startups, it's amazing.
So both of you thought entrepreneurship is something that we should be working on. It's great to hear that Georgia Tech has in fact picked that ball already, picked it up and is running with it. Jean-Christophe, do you have anything you want to add to anything that Georgia Tech could have done differently?
It was more, I did try to stay, I was looking for either staying for a PhD at Georgia Tech, or I knew that if I would go back to France, I would start my company. And the sad side of the story is that I was not aware of the Georgia Tech program to start your company. Mm-hmm. So, but I think it's, if I would have been to Georgia Tech now, I would have been fulfilled with that program.
Fantastic.
But I think you have the tools now.
Fantastic. One of the things that struck me when Marta approached me to come and engage with the network with Georgia Tech alumni group a few years ago, what impressed me the most was the fact that how successful Georgia Tech has been as a network of individuals working almost independently. And if you look at London, there's about 900 alumni in London. I don't know if you knew this, but there's about 900 people in the UK that are Georgia Tech alumni. So that's a substantial group of people, but we barely know each other. So we have our work that has been done with our WhatsApp group that is led by Nico there. But what are we going to do? I think the question we'd like to ask you guys now is, what more would you expect Georgia Tech to do? And all of you in your work have been exposed to what Harvard is doing and INSEAD is doing and Stanford is doing. What could Georgia Tech do more to engage with the network and actually create value both for new students but also for alumni? And I'll let Kurt, you take that off.
Well, I mean, this HM concept that the provost was talking about, I think is a brilliant idea. How do you build an ecosystem? And so what's happening now under March's leadership, I really applaud it, because I've not had the advantage of being able to leverage the Georgia Tech network in my career at all. That's partly because I've lived in different places. Obviously, if I lived in Atlanta,
you live in the world, though.
Yes, that's true. So so having that really strong network and being able to connect with that and build a community around that, where you could have help and also contribute to it, I would really desire and would be happy to support.
Matt, do you have any?
Yeah. So I think Look, I didn't know there's 900 people here. I
Does that
met a
surprise
couple.
you? It's pretty surprising.
It does surprise me. I would say in the past, Georgia Tech's at least alumni network, and probably as much a fault or more fault for my own, is less proactive than some of the other institutions. Like I'm not going to take part of Stanford, and not a week goes by, it's almost annoying. They ask for money or help. But I think I've got to know Marta a bit and people over the last year. I just are in a place where my job is to give out money. It's not my own, so I get a lot of invitations for things, mostly to try to get money, and I find it hard to do the one-to-many. But I think actually where I find it helpful is when you narrow it down to kind of a one-on-one, where you either feel like you can make an impact or there's a better connection. And it's hard to do that in a large group, but I challenge if there's a way to do it. I met Damon for a beer, and I still owe him something on a reply, but I feel like it can make an impact helping an entrepreneur in a business that we have connections around, or some of the people we meet here. So my only suggestion, I don't know if there's a way to do it, is almost a matchmaking aspect of it in my mind is more effective than the show up to the 13th invitation for drinks on a Thursday evening.
So quality rather than quantity, you think, is the
yeah, it's some element of that of where there's a true impact that you think either you can have or someone needs from you, and there, at least for myself, it's more meaningful and more actionable than just kind of attending a event.
Were you aware, obviously, you may have known of Georgia Tech Mets, but were you aware of what they're capable of doing and all the stuff that they've done?
Yeah, for me, I love Georgia Tech graduates because I think it prepares for the future. Yeah. We have a company of like 35 people, and I brought 4 Georgia Tech people there. I like the mindset it gives you, the tenacity you have if you're successful there, the real life experience. But it's usually not omnipotent or omnipresent in day-to-day life.
Yeah. Jean-Christophe, do you want to add to that?
I think it could be interesting is we plan next March with several entrepreneurs to take a visit of Georgia Tech and some research, a group of Georgia Tech with Marta. I think it could be things interesting for any people interested in establishing some links, and there is also this MBS program they have, and I think it's a good opportunity for people like us having companies. I didn't have the chance right now to start that, but I know I've been approached by someone who is running it, and I think it's could be a real value to keep this link with Georgia Tech and the capacity of in terms of research and.
So getting involved with research is one thing that you would think would.
Well, this is my aspect, yes. Okay. Research. And,
that's good. It's very personal. Matt, what do you think? Do you want to add anything?
No, I don't really have much to add, really. I was thinking about, I think to some of the others' point, I probably have not connected with tech as much as I could have.
Even though it was a childhood dream to join tech, then.
Yeah, I mean, I think once I got out of there, I was just barely surviving, So I think there's some element of that, if there's a pattern of people who get communication but then don't interact, then maybe that communication needs some tweaking.
Yeah.
So that to me is more, it's more of a question than an answer. But I know I'm guilty of it. Sounds like others are too. So there's some element in that communication style that I think can be improved. What I need to think more about how to do that, though.
So comms. There's a lot of comms, networking, and opportunity of participating in some of the work that they do, like research and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of opportunities. I mean, I've had interns at Expedia the whole time I was there. We've got openings on our team at Burberry. So it's not like we couldn't get people in there. It's more about connecting those dots as to kind of having that communication that's open and figuring out how I could do it.
So information would be an element to that, for you knowing what's happening to understand that.
Absolutely. I mean, even like the itinerary of kind of like what's coming up. I mean, I don't know when graduation is. I don't know when interns are looking for internships. Those are things I probably could get from comms that I've not interacted with enough. Right.
Fantastic. I have tons of questions, but I thought maybe I'd open up to the public. Do you have any questions in the audience? That Damien is always ready with questions, so usually. No? So I think what I'd really like to know is where do you think an organization like, what advice would you give for students that are joining Georgia Tech to how to make the most of it? And what role could alumni play, especially European alumni that are in Europe, to help some of the things that are happening at Georgia Tech? So what advice would you give to yourself going to Georgia Tech? Let's put it that way. Start with Matt.
I think I didn't realize when I joined the premium that the branding of the school had. So I think if I were giving myself advice at that age, it would be to understand that. I mean, when I was recruiting at Expedia, got friends at Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, you limit the number of schools that you even talk to recruit. You know, there's this idea that people apply, but the reality is that we send out a list. If we look at, you know, I was recruiting in the UK, I would take the top 15 computer science schools and I would just stack rank them and I would hand that to the recruiter. Go recruit these schools. Yeah. And we start there. And that's how we set up the London office. So I think I would have had a respect and I would have tried to leverage that a bit more had I known it. I mean, even when my little
realize
brother,
the value of the brand, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, my little brother went to school. He didn't go to tech. And I told him, I was like, you know, you cannot underestimate the premium of a brand when you come out of school. Yeah. Like I said, undergrads they never get a chance if you didn't go to the right school. And when I was recruiting, I can't tell everybody's that way, but I'm sure there are others. That's something I would have taken more advantage of.
Thanks. Kurt, what would you say? What advice would you give yourself?
I think
more accounting, maybe one?
Yeah, more accounting. It would have been helpful. Yeah, I had some disasters there to tell you about. I think main thing for me is I would look to leverage the Georgia Tech network more. So I've not, utilized that at all. So I think that's very key. And I think anyone going into tech and coming out and looking to move into the world of work, clearly one of the things I learned very quickly is that you must, as you progress and as you take a risk in your career, you must often leave expertise behind, which is a very difficult thing to do when you've really, been through the ringer at tech, learning and becoming an expert in something. But that's clearly what it's about. And maybe the other thing I would say, having been through a couple economic cycles, is that it's very important to think in a macro level about industries to be involved with. Because if the tide is not rising, you may think that you're the world's best entrepreneur or the world's best business person or the smartest engineer, but chances are, if the industry fails, you will fail as well. Yeah. And so it's a lot better to be in a growth area. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of headroom. So I think, and it's often very easy to assess the market that way. And so I think looking at those macroeconomic trends and trying to find the right wave to surf is always wise as well.
Good. Matt, do you want to add anything? What would you tell yourself?
I tell myself? I don't know. I think, and my perception is Georgia Tech has grown a lot in resources over the last 15, 20 years. And just when you look at the campus and what was there like pre-Olympics and then post, just all the buildings, the environment, the resources are an order of magnitude different. And I think what you get with that is not only the premium, the brand, but you get a lot of opportunity. Yeah. I don't know tech as well in the last 10, 15 years, but my sense is the opportunity is more prevalent. It's still a place and everybody's own job to take advantage of it. So,
make the most of what you got.
Make the most, just ask. That's my thing. It's like people can say no, but you never get what you don't ask for. And that would be my advice. We're always hesitant as people to feel like you're imposing, feel like you're doing something that's out of the way, or you're telling somebody to do something that's not right. They can always say no, and you go on to the next thing. So I think you can do that for asking professors
So
for
to
help.
summarize, go for it is the.
It's the cost of failure when you're a student is low.
Yeah.
And so use the opportunity to actually get those resources to work for you. And I think that can be pretty powerful if you do it right.
Thank you very much. And Jean-Christophe, do you want to add anything? What would you tell yourself?
For me, it was a question of just enjoying the experience as much as I could, and it was a kind of a way to enjoy the US, which was kind of something you always think, but you have no idea of what it is. So for me, what was really important as a European guy was to not be with the French, but really be immersed with the Americans, the international. Actually, we rent a house. We were 10 in this house. We had a blast because we worked our ass off, and then we had a party from late to late. And so I had the double pleasure to have a lot of pleasure in my studies and achieve everything I wanted and still enjoy the experience. So I would say do both if you can and just enjoy.
So thank you very much. I think in closing, because we're out of time, but sorry, Marta has something for us. Okay. Suspense. Fantastic. So I was planning to do that. Ultimately, what it seems to me is that what we really enjoyed in being at Georgia Tech was what are our core values. So the toughness and the competitiveness and the fact that nothing was really that easy was what made us great. And with that came the branding and the whole cachet that goes with being part of the group. What we're asking, I think, for you senior Georgia Tech people is we need to get more engaged with the network, and we'd like to know more about it. We'd like you to do it in a more intelligent way that some of the other schools are doing, but we definitely would like to have more interaction with the school. Does that summarize? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, and we have a 10-minute break now. That was the notes that I was...